Well, you're in for a treat. This is one of my favorite people, Annie Grace, author of This Naked Mind: Control Alcohol, Find Freedom, Discover Happiness, and Change Your Life. And she is not kidding. She delivers in this work. It is awesome. We're going to talk about the book. We're going to talk about her other projects that are online that you can access right away. So if you are looking to get sober, if you have been struggling with alcohol, if you kind of feel like you are deprived or dealing with sacrifice when it comes to putting alcohol down or your drug of choice, believe me, you're not going to feel that way after reading her work and doing her program. So buckle up. Let's enjoy this conversation with Annie Grace.
Here, we want to show you what's possible in the world of sobriety. We introduce you to the various tools, programs, and resources available, because there are way more options than you may even realize. We want you to find the one that works for you.
And we do it through people who share their pathway to recovery and will help you find your path to freedom. Because getting sober can feel hard enough. You don't have to do it alone. I'm Sarah Roberts.
And I'm Roger DeVoe, and this is Sobriety Starts Here.
Oh, Annie Grace, I am so excited to have you to chat with today. Oh my gosh, you know what a big fan I am of yours. You are the author of This Naked Mind: Control Alcohol, Find Freedom, Discover Happiness, and Change Your Life. And that it definitely does. It's an amazing book. I've read it a couple of times, and I wanted to have a conversation with you to find out why you wrote the book, who it serves, and where people can find more about it. So welcome. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you so much, Sarah. It's a pleasure.
And people will now notice we literally are wearing the exact same color, and this was not planned. It's not like I email or call my guest to say, let's make sure we match, but this just happened to be, so I love it. I'm a big fan of hot pink, or whatever we're going to call it. And all right, so let's get started. So This Naked Mind, I know you wrote the book a couple of years ago. What was the impetus for writing it, and who does it serve?
So I think the impetus for writing it was really, we'll get into sort of my story at some point, I guess, but it was really just the fact that I felt like I had something that could help other people. And once I kind of freed myself, I actually it was really ugly. It was a bunch of journal entries, and they were quite messy, but I had them in this big long Word document. I made it a PDF, and I put it available just for free download on a website, thinking, hey, other people could use this. I had no intention of really even writing a book. I was deeply in the corporate world, but I put it out there, and there were like 20 to 30,000 downloads in 2 weeks. And
wow.
So, yeah, it was nuts. It was so crazy. And I started just getting emails from people sort of all over the world saying that it really helped them. So I said, okay, I need to get serious about this. So then I started looking into how to get a book published. And I actually looked very briefly at traditional publishing. I was told it would take 18 months to 24 months, even if your book was already written. So I was like, no way am I going to do that, because there's just, I probably couldn't have gotten a traditional publisher anyway. I didn't have an audience or anything, but I just knew it needed to be in people's hands sooner than that. That was my main motivation. It was like, get this to people. And so found out that you can actually publish your own book on Amazon with CreateSpace. And so I just went through that process and did that, and it came out into the world. And I think, it's been a really cool thing.
Isn't it so cool that in this age of technology, I wrote my book in the exact same way. I use CreateSpace on Amazon, and it was like I had, a Word document, and then I changed it to iPages, but I was building that book for a few months, and all of a sudden it was in my hand, and it was like, how is this happening? It's such a cool time to be able to write and to get our thoughts out there. And you're so right when you say that you just really knew that this could help people, and that was the impetus for you wanting to get it out into the world, because it absolutely does help people. I can't believe that you had that many downloads of just that document that you created. And I can't even imagine how many books have been sold by this point. I mean, I'm sure, the hundreds of thousands. And imagine the many lives that you have improved, saved, changed. It's incredible the work that you're doing. So I just want to take a moment to thank you for what you have done. So I know my pleasure. It's the truth. I know that you took some influence from Alan Carr, and I know that Dr. Sarno was also an influence for you. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was really interesting. It was after I had really stopped drinking myself, and the the Dr. Sarno was before. So Dr. Sarno was because I was experiencing very severe back pain myself. And that was, from the age of my son was about 3 all the way till he was about 5. And it was just so intense. And I tried everything. I probably spent over $10,000, muscle relaxants, traction, chiropractic, everything else. Wouldn't fix it. And then eventually somebody recommended this book to me called Healing Back Pain by Dr. John Sarno. And the premise in the book is that we repress emotions unconsciously and they manifest as pain. And so he's like, okay, you can believe this. He tells you this in the introduction. He goes, I know you're skeptical, but it's not your conscious mind I need to convince, it's your unconscious mind. And in order to do that, you have to read this 300-page book. And by the time it's done, your pain will go away. And the truth was that I was really desperate. Like I felt it was a time in my life I couldn't even pick up my kids. So I was like, all right, I'll give it a go. I'm very skeptical. But I read the 300-page book. My pain went away. And through that experience, I just was like, oh my gosh, our minds are so powerful.
Wow.
And I was also just struggling with drinking more than I wanted to be drinking. And I couldn't figure it out. Like I could stop or I could put rules on myself, but then I felt deprived. I felt miserable. And so that didn't seem any better than just giving into it. And so I felt like, damned if I do, damned if I don't, so to speak. And I just was wondering, I was like, would this work for this problem? Because I formed this theory that my unconscious mind had been just inundated with pro-alcohol messaging for my entire life. And so now I consciously wanted to drink less, but my unconscious mind hadn't gotten the memo. And so I thought, okay, well, maybe I could apply this theory. And I actually got in touch with some people on Dr. Sarno's staff and asked them, like, would this work? And they said, yes, it would work. And then after that happened, and after I started doing the research into the unconscious mind and everything else, I was actually reading a book called Hypnotic Writing. And I was reading it for my job. It's a copywriting book, and I was in marketing. So I was reading this book for my job. And in this paragraph, and I'd already stopped drinking, but in this paragraph, the author mentioned 2 books that are like hypnotize you. Like basically you read them and everything shifts and everything changes. And it was Dr. John Sarno's book and Alan Carr's book. And so I'd never even picked up Alan Carr's book. I had all my reams of research about what alcohol does, about the unconscious mind, about the brain. But then I picked up Alan Carr's book and I was like, wow, this is what he's doing. He is changing through narrative form your unconscious. And so it was kind of the missing piece of like, okay, this is how this all fits together. It was really cool.
That is so cool. And it is so amazing that you can honestly make the claim that so for sure, Alan Carr, he does the easy way to stop smoking. I gave that as a gift to many people after I quit. I didn't use his book to quit, but I read it after I quit. And I thought, I wish I had read it earlier. I would have quit years prior, but I did give it as gifts because you're right. I mean, you just read through it. And at the beginning, you're just like, I'm not going to quit. I'm not planning on quitting. And then by the end of it, you find yourself completely disgusted by cigarettes. And so of course you would never want to smoke again. And you're using that kind of same, so is it liminal thinking? Is that the term that we're...
Yeah, so liminal thinking is something that a third sort of party to this this endeavor. His name is Dave Gray, and he's a good friend of mine. And he came up with this just very methodical way to actually look at what your belief pattern is. And, we have reality here. And if you imagine, we've got, even, I know you're in Canada and I'm in the US. And so reality is this, but because you're in Canada and because I'm in the US, we've had different experiences, different governments, different social influences. And so we have different beliefs, but neither one of them is based on reality. They're actually based on our observations, our assumptions, our experiences, and our conclusions. And so liminal thinking is simply the act of questioning all of those things to get back down to what is more or less true. And so what you do is you say, is this true? So we could take the belief, does alcohol relax you? You can say, is this true? And what I do, it's like really a 3-step process. Is it true internally? And I really reflect on, does it actually relax me the next day? Sure, it feels relaxing in the morning, but am I relaxed, after 5 years of drinking? Am I more or less relaxed than I was before 5 years of heavy drinking? And then you look at it externally and you really bring in the evidence and say, okay, does alcohol relax? I did studies or read studies on mice. Does alcohol relax mice when they're put through obstacle courses? Well, no, it doesn't. It does just the opposite of that. And so you bring in this external evidence, and then you just really draw a new conclusion based on the evidence. And it's interesting because we have beliefs are emotional by definition. You know, we believe stuff because they feel true, but we don't always know where they came from. And when you do this process, your emotions shift. So that's what's so profound about it, is that instead of with willpower, you are always fighting against something you think you want or believe provides a benefit. So you go on and on and on to say, I'm not going to drink. And this was me just for so long. I'm not going to drink tonight because it's a Monday night, but I'd feel like I was missing out because I still thought, even though it's a Monday night, I still was stressed today. And I believed that alcohol relieved my stress. So there was just this constant fighting against my desires. And with this, your entire perspective shifts to where you actually feel like, okay, I'm stressed out, but I don't feel as if alcohol would relieve my stress. Not only do I not think it will, but I don't feel it will. And then there's no sort of willpower required because you have this new knowledge.
It's really a brilliant way of unpacking it, because I think for so many of us, we do have that fear that we're going to be missing out, that life is better with alcohol, that, you know, to quit means that we're not going to be a part of our social group, our peers are going to walk away from us, and all of those fears, our sex life is going to suffer, everything is going to be terrible. I'm working with a client now where, you know, they really feel like with alcohol, it enhances everything. It makes them stronger, better, faster, funnier. And it's just like, these are just beliefs that we hold, and those beliefs can be challenged and they can be changed. And that's the beauty of this naked mind. It truly does that. But before you're done the 300 and however many pages, 200 and some odd pages, you will have those beliefs be really challenged and really questioned. And for many people I know that have read your book, some that I've given it as gifts to, they have said it has completely changed their view of drinking, of alcohol, and some have even quit with it if it was becoming a problem for them. So it's absolutely awesome. Your work is incredible. Where can people find this Naked Mind?
So it's in most bookstores now, thankfully, because it is now traditionally published, and it's also on Amazon, barnesandnoble.com. I think you can even find it on like walmart.com or target.com. So
it's
pretty
everywhere. It's awesome. So I'm going to hold it up one more time. I just want people to know what it looks like so that you can look for it in your stores, anywhere really that sells books, or of course on Amazon. So that is awesome. I would love to get into your story just so that we can really get kind of a baseline and understand where you come from, knowing that you've got all of this research and all of this information packed into this book, but it comes from a place of you having this experience with alcohol that, that informs your journey. So I'd love to get started with that. Let's go back to the beginning, back to your childhood. Were you a drinker as a young person? Did you come from a family that of alcoholics or of people that drank heavily? I'd love to know sort of the history of your life.
Yeah, absolutely. So no, I wasn't a drinker. I actually didn't really drink much at all until probably the age of 26. And my parents weren't drinkers. And I think that was, you know, pretty influential to me. But equally, they weren't people who were sober because they had a problem. So there wasn't any caution there. They just didn't really drink. Actually, my dad, I think, drank very, very heavily. I know he drank very, very heavily in college, but that was like a different part of his life, and he didn't talk about it. And when he stopped drinking, it was very spontaneous. And so he didn't ever bring that sort of home. Like there was no influence, I guess, one way or the other. So not only was there no influence about cautioning me not to drink, but there wasn't any influence that, you know, it was bad or harmful at all. So, you know, I didn't, at the age of 26, I had graduated from college, and I drank here and there in college, but it was never a big thing. It was maybe once or twice a month, if that, probably less. And at the end of college, I got married. I moved to New York City, and I was working for this large company. I was one of the youngest vice presidents in the entire company. And I was literally told that being at happy hour was like part of the job. You know, it was where relationships were formed, where your ideas were heard. Like it was just very, very highly encouraged. And since I hadn't been showing up as much, you know, I was told I needed to show up there more.
And especially as a young professional and as a female. I mean, that's just, you know, we've got to try to keep up, right? Because it's a male-dominated industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that because of that, and because I knew I was a lightweight at that time, I mean, one glass of wine had me tipsy. I actually built a formula. So it was a glass of wine, a glass of water, a glass of wine, a glass of water. And then, you know, Sarah, at one point, well, many points, but at one point I started realizing that if I started feeling the alcohol, because I never wanted to be drunk in front of I cared about my career. Alcohol was like a tool for my career at this point in time. And so I never ever wanted to be drunk or tipsy. So I'd go and I'd throw up a glass of wine just so I could drink another one and stay out, because they were all in their 40s. They were mostly men, I'd say 90%. And yeah, it was definitely hard to keep up. So I just had that little method.
I'm curious, did the other women that you worked with, did you talk about this at all? About how to keep up and how to drink like the boys?
There were no women at my level.
Okay.
I was the only woman in the boardroom almost the whole time I was in my career.
Yeah. All right. So you're not much of a drinker growing up. I remember reading that in your story about your dad, or maybe we had a conversation about it. I can't remember. Did you write about it in the book about your
I did.
dad?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I remember you saying that. So I wonder, of course we know there's sometimes there can be a genetic component. And I think you touch on that in the book as well.
Yeah, so I think that, genetics are interesting because they're so mysterious to us still. Like, wouldn't it be amazing if we could just test for a gene that said, okay, you, Annie, need to stay away from alcohol, because guess what? As soon as you start drinking, it's going to be a slippery slope, and all of a sudden you're going to be addicted. Mm-hmm. But the research that I've done it just shows it doesn't work that way. There's certainly genes that are involved, and there's things that have higher markers, but there's no single gene that's responsible for addiction. And also, I think more importantly, is that there isn't an instance that somebody becomes addicted to a substance they haven't used repeatedly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's such a great point, because we build up that tolerance, right? I mean, that's all part of it. We decide whether or not this is going to be a part of our lives. It becomes a habit for us. We build up our tolerance, and then it can become a problem for so many of us. So, all right, so keep going with your story. I want to keep hearing after, now you're in your big career, you're a vice president, you're trying to keep up, you're sometimes purging a glass of wine so you can have another one to just keep up. When does it become the point where you're not just trying to keep up, you're enjoying this? And because it doesn't sound like you were really enjoying it up to this point.
No, I wasn't really enjoying it. And it's funny because that point, like, I can't pinpoint it. Like, there's a lot of moments in my story that I could say, oh, I remember when that happened. I remember when that happened. But that blurred line from when it was a work thing on occasion to where that was an every night thing, the point where it went from I wasn't really enjoying it to I would go home, and instead of putting on my running shoes, I'd be like, oh, it's easier to just pour a glass of wine, to the point where I was like the instigator with my husband, even like, okay, let's go buy a bottle. And all of a sudden I was drinking every single day. And then fast forward, because I can't pinpoint it. Like, it was so insidious in a way. That's one reason I really started looking at it, is because it crept up on me in such a way that was never conscious. It just happened, and it almost felt like it happened to me. I know I made my own choices throughout that entire time, but it definitely felt like all of a sudden here I was, and then all of a sudden there I was. It was 10 years later. Now, instead of just being head of marketing for North America, I was head of marketing for the entire globe. I was responsible for 28 countries. So I was traveling internationally in business class, which means the alcohol was like ever present, means time zones got completely blurred. So I'd get on a plane at, 6 p.m. And then for me, it was still that same night, but I was landing at 7 or 8 p.m. I'd drank wine the entire flight. So when I'd land, I'd feel really bad that I had to go in the office. So I'd just stop in the first class lounge, which guess what? Free alcohol, all hours, 24 hours a day, get my 6 a.m. glass of wine to go and handle the office until I could like substitute it with coffee to get through the day until I could be 5 p.m. and I could start drinking again. It's amazing to me that I held it together with how much I was drinking, because whatever I did to build my tolerance worked. And so when I stopped drinking, I still worked in my job for another year. And I remember people saying, well, why'd you stop? I don't even remember ever seeing you drunk. You certainly didn't have a problem. But I was miserable, and it was a problem for me, even if it wasn't a problem externally. And so, yeah, it was very intense time. And I look back and I'm like, how could a body drink that much alcohol and function? It's surprising.
And not just function, high level functioning, responsible for an entire globe. That is unbelievable. And it was interesting when you said that you were miserable. When did you kind of realize that you were no longer like, okay, so you didn't really enjoy it. Did you ever enjoy it?
I think there were times, like beach vacations and stuff, but even then, like I remember this one moment where it was my husband and I and another couple, and we went to the Bahamas, I think, and we were out drinking. And so we went at 11 in the morning, and we all got like really drunk at 11 in the morning. And then we went back to the hotel room, and it made, like, I fell asleep. And then I remember we had really nice dinner plans that night. And after waking up from being drunk in the middle of the day, you can wake up, but you feel awful, just awful. And so I knew that alcohol was doing that to me, but it was also just like something that was so much fun. So I think I did enjoy it. But it's really hard to pinpoint. Like if I look back on stuff and I'm like, okay, let's think of a time where I just had a blast because of drinking. Like they're very few and far between, and they're very fuzzy, and they're always immediately chased with something that was not fun, which was feeling just awful. And, and I think when I knew I wasn't enjoying it, I wasn't thinking about it, Sarah. Like, I think that that's the thing, is that it's hard for me to recall because it was just a part of life. It was necessary for my work. It felt now necessary to relax, necessary to socialize, necessary to go on vacation. So it wasn't something I was considering. It was just like oxygen. It was like status quo. Just drinking was like breathing. But there was times when I'd wake up in the middle of the night or wake up early, and my alarm would go off and I'd have to get ready for a meeting, and I just would feel awful, and even smell, like you could smell it on your skin or in your breath. And it was just like disgusting to me. But what I do is I'd pretty quickly just put that out of my head, and because I didn't even feel like I had much of a choice in the matter at times.
You mean because you didn't have a choice in the matter because of keeping up this role in the company?
Yeah, and because of keeping up the role in the company, and also just because I don't think that choice really was in my consciousness. Like it was just like, this is what's happening. I didn't ever consider that there could be a different way. I did not consider for a very, very long time that I just didn't have to drink. And that was one of the most freeing moments for me, was that realization, like, I don't have to be doing this anymore, which is so funny. But it was like such a profound moment of, oh my gosh, I don't have to do this. Like, I'm in charge of me. I don't know what happened along the way, but I don't actually have to do this.
I really relate to your comments about not really knowing if you were enjoying it anymore, feeling like it was just that thing you do. And because that was my story. I drank. I don't know if it was fun or not. I mean, it was just a matter of, that's how you go out with people. That's how you do the things you do. That's how you go golfing. It's what you do. You just have to drink. So I didn't get to that point that you did, where you sort of had that moment where it was like, oh wow, I don't have to do this. I hit a rock bottom of sorts where I was like, I can't do this anymore. And so what I love about your work is that you're giving all of us an opportunity to embrace that reality, that you can find this freedom. You do have that option to say, you don't have to drink anymore. Like, it's not a prerequisite for living. You can make that choice. And it's not easy necessarily, but honestly, going through this book, it makes it a hell of a lot easier for sure, because your beliefs are constantly being challenged as you read every page. And I love that you mentioned, I think early on in the book, where you say, I'm going to keep repeating stuff and just keep going with it. Just know that that's what happens because I'm getting to your subconscious. And that's exactly what your work does. It's incredible. It really does help us to find freedom in the knowledge that we don't have to do this thing that we think we have to do to survive.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that I like to think about it, and I feel grateful every day, is that somehow, by some source of grace, I had this moment where I saw where the train was headed, and I was able to get off of it before it crashed and before it went to places I didn't want to go. And I mean, that's just such an incredible gift, because so often we do have to go through that crash or through that bottom in order to come out the other side. And I think, yeah, that's a lot of people's stories. But it's interesting because a lot of my readers, I'll read reviews on Amazon from people like, I picked up this book from my sister and now I don't like beer anymore. What have you done to me? And it's like, they're happy about it, but they're like, cheeky with me about it, because it's like, wow, people can see where the train might be going and say, I don't want to be on this train anymore. But you know, sometimes we need something really big to make that happen. And sometimes, you know, we just need a little more information.
Well, it's funny because I often quote you. One of my favorite quotes from your book is, alcohol is the only drug we have to justify not taking. You know, alcohol is the only drug we have to justify not taking. I mean, you would never, you know, somebody offering you cocaine, it's not like, that's ridiculous. Somebody, you know, telling you got to do it, and you know, I mean, why is it different with alcohol? Why is it like that? And we know why. I mean, society sets us up to believe that it's safer, that it's okay, that it's sophisticated, all of those social reasons. And of course, then all of the health reasons, of course, that we're seeing too, that it lowers heart disease and all the rest of it. And then you scroll past the headline and you know, read that moderate drinking is 1 glass of wine, 1 4-ounce glass of wine. Well, I certainly know for myself that was never the case, never, ever, ever the case. So heavy drinking to me, you know, or excessive drinking to me, I didn't label myself as that. I thought that I was just a typical drinker. And then when you actually look at how much alcohol it takes to be a heavy drinker, I mean, that was me on a Monday. Like that was every day for sure, you know, a very heavy drinker. So I love just all of the research and the statistics and the work and effort that you've put in to help us rewire our brains to know that we can find this freedom. We do not have to do this thing. I had a question about you and your relationship with your husband. So did he drink when you first met? Was this something that you sort of encouraged in your relationship, or how did that work?
So we met in college, and we met when we weren't really drinkers. Like we didn't do much of it. I remember we were probably 22, and we took a 4-month trip to Thailand, and we decided we would plan one night out to go clubbing and drink. But other than that, like, I mean, it was a lot because we were broke and we couldn't really afford it. And so we didn't really, but it wasn't really a thing for us. So we didn't drink a ton. Then we were a long distance relationship for a long time, and he ended up actually getting into it a bit sooner than I did. So he started working at a bank, and sure enough, the happy hours, the coworkers, and all this stuff. And I remember being on the phone with him a few times and him just being drunk. And I was like, what is happening to you? Like, this is ridiculous. And so I was like, how about this? How about we'll just make it so that we just have 1 beer a night or something? I remember being really upset. And he's like, whatever, I don't have a problem. I don't know what you're talking about. And he has been pretty much a take it or leave it sort of person. So he got out of that job. We ended up coming back together. We got married. We moved to New York City, and he was working in an investment bank, which talk about the pressure to drink. So, you know, we hadn't been drinking a lot together, but then I was working the job I was working, he was working in an investment bank. Every single activity was around drinking. In Colorado, you can go hiking or ice skating or skiing, and in New York City, it's drinking or drinking or drinking. And so anything you wanted to do socially was around alcohol. And again, his parents actually didn't drink either when they were like his whole life. So we didn't have a cautionary tale. When I didn't even know alcohol was addictive. Like, I really didn't know that. And if you talk to a lot of people who are younger today, that's just not in their consciousness. Like, oh wait, I can become addicted to this? I thought just alcoholics could become addicted to that, which, you know, is one of the paradigms I really hope that we can all shift together, because that's just not true. But so then we just got into it together. So then we'd both bring it home and we'd both drink. And by the time that I stopped drinking, we just always match each other for drinks. If we're having a bottle of wine, we're both having a bottle of wine. There was on the rare occasion where I think I was outpacing him and he'd be like, hey, maybe we should just not drink tonight. And I remember getting really grumpy with him and really like, what are you talking about? Like upset. But there was something, the worm there saying, okay, wait a second. Like, if he's questioning it, this could be definitely a problem for me. And then I stopped drinking and he didn't stop drinking, which was really interesting, because I was like, I did this for me. Like, this is not about anybody else. It's no problem at all. And so he went a year drinking. His drinking drastically diminished because I wasn't kind of, you know, right there with him. So he had to like really consciously decide to pour a drink, whereas I was usually the one opening the bottle of wine. And then right before, so it took me a year to actually go through that create space process. So through that process of getting the whole book ready and edited and everything else, I said, okay, I'm going to publish this book. So you need to read it, because I talk about us. I talk about everything. I talk about our family. you need to read it before it's published. And it was like, he put it off to the last day. He had one day to read the entire book. So he just sat out on our porch. He read the whole book. I think it was like October 13th, because it came out on the 15th. And he read it all. And then the next year he had 1 or 2 beers at a college game with his friends. And then the year after that, he didn't really have a drink. And then I think maybe I think he's maybe had 4 beers in the last 3.5 years. Like, so it just totally shifted. But it wasn't, he never said, he's like, I'm never going to sit here and like put a flag in the ground and say I'm not a drinker. But, you know, I think just through the work that I'm now doing and everything, he's like, it's just no point. So it's never even been really a conversation with us. Like, I've never pressured him, and he's just very naturally so. But now recently, like when people talk to him, he's like, oh yeah, we don't drink. Like it's in his, it just rolls off his tongue. So yeah, it's cool.
Isn't that the beauty of it too, when, as you know, for people who read your work and connect with you, that you're able to just really change their mindset to a point where it really doesn't feel like sacrifice or deprivation. It really feels empowering. And that is what I think is so important about what you do, because I know there are all sorts of pathways to recovery, all different ways that we can do it. But when we really feel like we are in the driver's seat and we are just making the choices that we want to make because it makes us feel so much better, and because we feel in control with that, and it's in alignment with the way that we envision our lives, I think that is when it really sticks. Like, sobriety really becomes true recovery, and it becomes just recovery, just becomes living a great life that we love to live, that we don't want to escape anymore with alcohol. Like, we realize that, you know, social outings are not more fun with it. Sex is not better with it. And I love that you address that in your book. You have a whole mini chapter on sex in recovery, and in not drinking, you know, like not having to have alcohol to have a good time with a partner or with yourself or with other people socially or at a sporting event or wherever. I just feel like in society, we are so bombarded by these messages that make us feel like without it, we are losers, we are not part of the club. And you're really spearheading and pioneering and helping us all to, you know, to realize that it's not the truth. That is just simply not reality. That's what's so awesome about your work. It's really what I truly connect with so much, and why I share your book with all of my coaching clients. I tell them, like, it's mandatory reading. You've got to read this pretty much in number 1. So it's awesome.
That's so cool. And I think too, you know, when Brian, my husband, made that shift, and I've had this from a few of my friends too, have read the book, they felt very much like it was their own decision. Like, my friend Sam, he read my book, and then a few months later, he's like, oh, hey, Annie, I just want to let you know, like, I don't know if it was your book, but I don't really think it was. I just kind of feel like I don't want to be drinking anymore. And I was like, sweet, like, don't tell him, but it definitely was. But like, it was so cool too, because it was like, that is the thing, right? To feel like it's my own decision. Because the book is, I mean, if you counted the question marks in that book, it's got to be off the charts, because it's literally a series, question after question after question. I'm not telling you what to believe. I'm asking you, you know, based on this, what do you think about that? You know, and I think that's why people really internalize it.
Absolutely. It really does get you to question your own behavior, and it really gets us to question what the truth is. And just like with smoking back in the day, I mean, doctors were smoking, telling us it was good for us. Over time, we were able to challenge those beliefs. We saw research, we saw studies, we saw people dying, and it was like, okay, that is just simply not the truth. And that's hopefully where things are headed with the alcohol-free movement. I believe that that's where we're going, but it is going to take more time. It's, you know, it's a big beast out there. So it's just going to take more of these conversations and more work to be done. But that's what's so cool. I love it that your friend thinks, you know, don't know if it was your book, but I quit drinking. It's like, definitely was my book. I remember you were featured on a podcast a while back, and I remember you telling the story of maybe not a rock bottom for some people, and some people might not even think my rock bottom, which was a DUI, which for me was a complete rock bottom. It destroyed every aspect of my life. The way that I saw my life, it could no longer continue because of that moment, because of that decision, that bad decision that I made. And I remember you sharing that you were in an airport with your husband, and I think your kids were with you, and you had bottles of beer in the bag, and they smashed on the ground, and all of these people were like judging you and watching you, and you had to try to clean it all up, and it was just mortifying for you. Was that what you would maybe consider the rock bottom? Like, was that kind of when you were thinking, wait a minute, there's something going on here?
Yeah, there was two really pivotal moments for me. And one was that where, yeah, like you said, these beers just exploded. And I had young kids at the time, 2 young boys, and they exploded all over my kids. And for the whole rest of the day, my kids smelled like beer. And just, yeah, it was funny, but like I was laughing on the outside and like just crying on the inside, because I was like, this is not who I want to be. Like, what happened? Like, why do I have beer in my bag at like 11 in the morning? Like, what's going on?
Mm-hmm.
And so that was really one for me. And then the second one was, they both happened in London, interestingly. That's the company I worked for, was headquartered over there. I was coming back from a work trip, and I had been out drinking all night the night before with a bunch of colleagues, like literally till like 4 in the morning. And then I went and got an hour's sleep, and then I had to be eating breakfast in the hotel to get in a 6 a.m. cab. And I went into the hotel bar, and like this was proper 6 a.m. So I kind of gave myself a little bit of leeway with the whole international travel thing. But other than that, I didn't drink in the morning, because I was like, this isn't really morning, it's whatever. But like, I didn't like proper 6 a.m. I'd been in London for a week. It was 6 a.m. And I went into the bar, and I ordered a mimosa, and they hadn't opened the champagne. And the reason I needed the mimosa was just because I just had this raging hangover. I felt absolutely miserable. I was like, I just need to get on the plane, then I can pass out again. And they didn't have any champagne. So she said, well, what about a vodka screwdriver? And that's vodka and orange juice. And so I said, okay, yeah. So I ended up drinking 2 of those. I get in the cab, I get to Heathrow Airport, I'm sitting in the tunnel. And it was just this moment of like, okay, I'm headed home to my husband and my kids. I'm going to be a disaster, not just from the international travel, but because of how I've treated myself and my body. They should be getting the best of me, and they're getting the absolute worst of me. And by the way, I'm drinking vodka at 6 in the morning, which is something I hadn't done before. And it was just one of those lines. I think we all have those lines like in our head, and like you cross them, and you can ignore it, which we do, or you can use it and say, wait a second. And so it was like literally right there. And I remember like, that's where those journals started that I ended up free download. It was like, that's where they started. I started writing, and I was like, I'm going to figure this out. I don't understand why I used to be able to have a good time without alcohol, and now I feel deprived. I don't understand why I used to be able to do my job without alcohol, and now I feel like dependent on it. Like, what happened? Like, I need to understand what happened. And I knew that I had to understand before I could change. Like, I just like, that's how I've always worked. So, yeah.
So how did the writing of those journals start? Was it just in your mind, private thoughts, like your experiences? Was it research? How did you start it? And did you expect that I know you said earlier that then all of a sudden you just put it out into the world. Did you expect you would share it with other people?
No, and I certainly haven't shared all of it with other people. So I have probably, like, there was the journals that were my research, that were like very specific to like, okay, this is my belief that I'm questioning. This is my answer. This is like my internal experience. This is my external experience. So those were like very specific to that. There was the journals that were just like they are like just me pouring out like, what am I doing? What's wrong with me? What's happened to me? And that I just wrote for nobody but me. And I've always been a big writer. I've always written lots and lots of journals. And so I still haven't read those all the way through. So, I mean, maybe I will someday, maybe I won't. But yeah, I kind of kept a separate, like I'd be on the computer and I'd be like, okay, I want to understand this. Like, why does it make it feel like I sleep better? Because that was one of my big reasons. Like, I had a hard time getting to sleep at night. I was anxious. And so what is it? And so I'd go and I'd, buy these studies. It's amazing now, because it used to be that you couldn't actually just buy the studies, but now you can go online and you can purchase all the information that you need. Like, you can go buy the studies. It's crazy. And so then I just read them and I understand like, oh, that's interesting. It's because it does this, but then later it does this. And like, those were the set of journals that I ended up downloading or sharing for download.
Well, it's amazing, because those journal entries became what we now know of This Naked Mind. And it is a powerful, powerful book. It's honestly something that for some people, it's all they need, right? Like it's you don't need to really go any farther. You can read this book. You can just make that decision for yourself that you no longer want to rely on alcohol, or you don't want it to play a role in your life anymore, because you can see all of the reasons why it just isn't serving you. I won't, I won't spoil anything with the book, but you know, Annie Grace really goes into all of the health reasons why we don't want to be drinking alcohol. What happens to the body when we are putting this toxic poison into our system? What's going on there? And then of course all of the social reasons why we drink, and she challenges that, and all of it is just absolutely amazing. Annie Grace, thank you so much for being with us today. I am so excited for people to get your book, for them to truly bring it into their lives and to realize that they have freedom in their hands just by reading through your book. It really is that powerful. And I've seen it in my own work where people have literally put the wine down and said that it's been the easiest transition of their life, and they never thought that they'd give up wine. So it doesn't matter if these are, you know, super heavy drinkers, alcoholic drinkers, occasional drinkers, people that just think that they have to do it. This can touch everybody and this can affect everybody. So I'm just really inspired by you and so grateful that you're doing the work you're doing, because it is amazing and it matters, and you are saving and changing lives. And I think you're awesome.
No, thank you, Sarah. I think the same about you. You know that. So thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor.
To get access to all of the free videos and interviews, visit sobrietystartshere.com.